morning, good morning. Hello, good morning. Welcome to Sunday Morning Coffee with Caryn episode 44. Woo! I love fours. I really, really, really love fours. So, today we are talking about the Inner Patriarch, which is an idea that was found by the creators of Voice Dialogue International. You might have heard of them. Sidra Stone is the woman who really was talking about this a lot in the 90s, who really came to find out that through working with women's groups, working with couples and men and women in the same group, she realized that when she separated the men and the women, that different things would happen. So in America, when the men and the women separated from each other, all of a sudden the women really opened up to each other and they started talking about their birth stories and about traumas and about like really creating this idea of womanhood, this sisterhood. And then when the men would like start coming back, even hearing the men walking around upstairs to come back down from lunch would just like shut down the whole group immediately. Like, oh, we have to go pay attention to the men. And then in Holland, she actually found the opposite to be true, where when everyone was together, they were able to conversate very easily. And when they separated the men and the women would shut down. And they would be like, they didn't even like being led by a woman in those groups, Sidra's a woman, and they're just like, no, we don't know how to do this. So through years and years, all this came out in the 90s. So this is like 20, 30 years worth of work that she's been talking about, this Inner Patriarch, and other people who have used voice dialogue or who have found out this Inner Patriarch from other people as well. This is an idea. It's not a new idea. Carl Jung talked a lot about subpersonalities. You guys know how much I love his work. Debbie Ford in The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, there's an entire section where you do a meditation where you get onto a school bus and you find pieces of your personality, you meet them, they have a name, they kind of tell you what part of you they represent and what it is that they need to be a fully integrated part of your psyche as well. So this idea of subpersonalities is not a new one, and today we're just going to be really laser focused on this Inner Patriarch. And the reason why I really want to talk about the Inner Patriarch truly has to do with the fact of everything that's going on in the world right now. We know that there is just some crazy stuff happening in the world everywhere. You have the race war, if that's what you want to call it. We are all a human race. There are definitely many different types of ethnicities, but race itself is a human construct. We don't have 5 different races. We have hundreds of ethnicities, but only one race. And we've been very focused on that as a society. And then there's all the other shadows of society. A lot of stuff was coming out about the Epstein case this week, and we were all kind of distracted, and stuff going on with Hillary Clinton finally getting subpoenaed. All these things that were happening on in the background that have to do with sex trafficking and pedophilia and just slave trade in general that still exists. It is unfortunately still thriving here in the 21st century. And it all comes back down to this idea that we are still stuck in the Aeon of Osiris in many ways. So the Aeon of Osiris was really that patriarchal, logical, war, power struggles, that sort of idea, versus the Age of Isis was that mothering, nurturing, creative time that was happening several thousand years ago. And those who follow Western esoteric groups, who might follow the work of Aleister Crowley, he believes that we had started the beginning of the Aeon of Horus, which is sort of this more hermaphroditical androgynous mixture, right? So the overcoming of duality and actually blending them together to create a whole new thing, which is the age of that we're really in from the 1900s. You can see from the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the gay rights movement, medical cannabis movement, all of these movements that we see that are really trying to encompass all of us as a whole. So what does that have to do with me individually? So the reason why this is super important is because constantly in my work with leaders, people who are leading in different causes in their community, in their businesses, they come to me and they're like, I just don't feel like I'm doing enough. I'm not doing enough work out there in the world. I'm not affecting enough people's lives. I'm not changing the world the way that I want to. And then we start looking, and they have pretty much abandoned their personal self-discipline. They've grown so much, they've done so much in their lives. They've been able to battle a lot of the demons that held them back before, and they get to this really comfortable success. They're what Gay Hendricks would refer to as they're living in their zone of excellence, right? But they haven't moved into that zone of genius. That's from his book, The Big Leap. What stops us from getting into that zone of genius is those subpersonalities, is those inner voices, the ones that we think that we've conquered, but we've just quieted them. We haven't fully integrated them into our lives. So when I say that I rectify dichotomies within people, it's this idea that you can actually love the versions of you that your conscious mind is probably trying to fight. So no self-respecting feminist is going to go in there and love her inner patriarch. Is really that separation that continues to happen even in the most woke spiritual communities that I found, transformational coaches, they will still try to pull things out of you, separate you. We need to separate you from your trauma. We need to separate you from your childhood. And that's not the way that super conscious living works, which is what I teach. It is an all-encompassing thing where we find those parts of us that our ego wants to hate and wants to destroy, and we let them have a voice. Now, again, I told you that I had learned this through voice dialogue. Voice dialogue is this idea where I would be talking to you as Caryn, and then the person facilitating would say, okay, I want to talk to Caryn's inner patriarch. And I would actually move my whole chair, and that puts me in a different frame of mind, and then everything that I'm saying after that is coming actually from my inner patriarch. It's really intense, awesome work, but you find out some of these things where you're like, I believe that about myself. I believe that women should just be barefoot and pregnant. That I love it when I'm not hitting. Like my inner patriarch, I'll tell you some of the things he says. So he says that he loves it when I am not hitting my financial goals in my business because that means that I have to stay dependent on my husband's paycheck. And he loves it when I get really focused on the housework and actually just don't work on my business at all. My inner patriarch does not like that I have this entrepreneurial spirit, and I've had it for the whole time my husband and I have been together. I've been a massage therapist, owned my own business for that whole time, and my inner patriarch doesn't like that. He loves it when I'm just barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. So the fact that my husband got a vasectomy, that I was very, very like, I'm done having babies, like I don't want to do this anymore. My inner patriarch doesn't like that my husband submitted to that control. He would prefer that I just be popping out babies all the time. And you guys know I live in Utah, so that's a part of it too, right? Like I have 3 kids, which to other people, oh my gosh, 3's a lot. But when you live in Utah, 3's pretty average, I guess. Like I have friends that most of my friends who have big families have 5, 6, 7 siblings, right? So like having a family of 5 or more is the norm in Utah. Having 3 is like pretty average, especially for a non-Mormon, and then like 1 or 2 it's totally not normal in Utah to only have 1 or 2 children. So that patriarchy, that, like the LDS church itself is very steeped in patriarchy. So I have a lot of that, like the guilt of not having a perfectly clean house. If you come to most people's like really good Mormon moms here in Utah, they cook amazing. Their house is always clean, even though they have 7 children. They live in nice big houses in the suburbs too. They don't have like a cleaning lady, or they do that only comes like once a week. She's the one doing it. She hand makes all the meals. She's the one that puts like makes all the bananas into little minions. Like just totally Susie homemaker, That is every single very traditional LDS mom that I have ever encountered, and I've lived in Utah for 28 years. So I'm sure that that's a pretty big generalization. I was also raised on the Upper East Side, which is a pretty nice area of town, but all of my friends growing up who were Mormon, all of their houses looked almost identical. They had lots of kids in their families. Like it's surreal. It's a very surreal thing when you walk into someone else's house and you're like, oh my gosh, this looks like her house, which looks like his house, which, do you guys like have a house plan? Like, how does this work? So my inner patriarch, what else does he say? He says that, oh, men are totally allowed to abuse their wives in any way possible. This is a huge one, and actually the biggest reason why I wanted to talk about this. We are now seeing, and this was already happening, I talked about it in April, how we were seeing an increase in domestic violence and child abuse, as well as it's just like people filing for divorce. And that number hasn't gone down at all. If anything, the courts are now backlogged with trying to get divorce papers filed. The systems are just totally screwed up right now with the amount of domestic violence cases that were sent out, and then the police couldn't really go get people to bring them into jail because the whole point was quarantine. People are starting to go back to work, so now they're like, oh, well, maybe it was just the quarantine. Maybe we don't really need to file for divorce because things are getting back to normal in some ways. And what I was realizing, even as this was playing out in my own relationship, I was dealing with it too, y'all, was this idea that I was listening to this belief. Well, two things. One thing was that everything that happened with me was exactly what I needed, which is exactly what's happening with everyone. So let me make sure that we reiterate this real quick before I start going down the abuse conversation, because I need you guys to really get where I come from when I say these things. I don't believe that anyone is a victim of anything, ever. And my clients are people who agree with that statement, that we are here creating a life that we have been unconscious to until a certain point, that when my clients start working with me, they're already consciously aware of their thoughts and feelings, and what they're wanting to do is move into those super conscious realms, tapping into quantum realities, tapping into timelines, getting resources, downloads, creating, really innovating, really creating something brand new by tapping into the universal mind. So very much like the work of Joe Dispenza, Greg Braden, those types of things is what I like. And again, Gay Hendricks, The Upper Limit Problem. I just read that book 2 weeks ago for the first time, but that's exactly what I teach. Like, essentially, super consciousness is breaking through the upper limit of conscious thinking. And so, because of this, I really truly believe that every person, from myself to my kids to my parents to the children that are starving to those children who are in the horrible slave trade to those women who are being domestically abused to even the people that are being murdered on camera for us to all witness, somewhere, somehow, in the infinite time, they are choosing this. That is a core belief along superconscious living, that there truly are no victims, because we are really infinite beings. This is just a step along the cosmic life existence, and whatever happens in your life is because you chose it. You're playing out karma. You have a mission where you need to be teaching lessons. Whether you're conscious or unconscious of this choice is irrelevant to the superconscious living, like to that axiom of superconscious living, is really this strong belief that there are no victims. That being said, I believe everyone who is playing a victim role is doing so for a lesson. So the fact that we have over 3 million cases of domestic violence abuse in America every year that are reported, and you have over almost 1 million of them end up actually being charged. So 3 million people call, only a third of them actually end up getting cited or any sort of repercussions. And then you have to remember that there's a whole lot of women who only would call the police. Like, you can really only call the police if there's physical violence going on. If they come and you're scratched up, or obviously there's been a fight or things like that. So when you're dealing with psychological, verbal, emotional, spiritual abuses, which are all things that the patriarchy uses, it's all about control of power. That's what the patriarch really, when you're thinking about patriarchy in this way, it's that very assertive, very masculine, very aggressive, controlling, angry part of society. Okay, the rage. If you just think about any sitcom on TV where the dad comes home from work, he's just kind of a little irritated, and the kids just kind of start pushing on him, and then he blows up and he yells, that is a symptom of systemic abuse of power. The fact that that dad would never ever act that way in his office, or with his bowling buddies, or with his own mother, but does find it appropriate to treat his children and his wife that way, is actually abuse. I know, it's fucking mind-blowing, right? I read this book recently called Why Does He Do That by Lindy Bancroft. And I'll leave in the description, guys. I'll come back through and edit the description so that you can see the names of these resources that I'm mentioning. Really talks about abuse in this whole new way, that even though this book was written in the early 2000s and based on research that he had done through the 90s, again, it's really interesting to me because I'm finding all this research from the 90s that kind of just disappeared during the early 2000s that's now resurfacing again right now with this idea of abuse of power, this abuse in general, this control via anger and fear. So when you're talking about abuse, like really dial in on that definition. Control of power using anger and fear. Okay? I'm pretty sure if you're watching this live stream, you can think of at least 3 men in your life. And yes, I'm going to say men because on average, it's more pertinent in heterosexual female-male relationships that the man is the abuser. And the inner patriarch is a male energy. And we're looping back onto why the 4 ways that you're going to really be able to work through this. We've kind of already mentioned them. The first way is just recognizing that you have these subpersonalities, that you have different parts of you that are floating around inside of your ego trying to get love and validation. So you're going to have that sexy sultress, and you're going to have the Susie homemaker, and you're going to have the really smart, geeky part of you. And so all the little pieces of your personality, we do pretty good at pulling them together, but when it comes to things like this, like your inner patriarch, or your like super kinky cosmic pain slut, as I refer to her, those parts of you are things that you have to more consciously go through and integrate. It's pretty easy for us to just throughout our lives be like, okay, yeah, I'm a nerd. I'm a super nerd, and I love to geek out, and I love to do research. Those things, you don't really need to go like mentally in there and find your super nerd inside of you and accept and love her. You've done that. But going through and accepting and loving that there's a part of you that really thinks it's hot and kinky to abuse women, and then another part of you that likes to be abused, those things are hard for your conscious ego to like accept. So that's the first thing, is just understanding that concept of subpersonalities. And then the second part, understanding that there are dichotomies to these subpersonalities. You are a whole person, right? You are a whole person living a whole human experience. And then I guess third, I don't know if I would add this as the third exactly, but we have to remember overall that there are no victims, that we are choosing our lives consciously or unconsciously or superconsciously. When you're choosing it superconsciously, you're writing your own fate. You know exactly what's going to happen in your life because you know that you're taking the actions that are going to merit those results, and you've tapped into that quantum field and have access to resource that more than 95% of the population just doesn't have access to. There's only about 75 million people on the planet that can truly tap in to the resources that I'm talking about. Not that everyone can't, it's just that only about 75 million people do on a regular basis, and there's 8 billion people on the planet. So my whole thing doing these lives every week, having my super conscious leader group, teaching one-on-one, going out and doing speaking engagements, all of the things that I create is to increase the general population that are using these quantum resources, tapping into that super conscious mind and really writing their own lives, really understanding and owning that they are both the author and the character of their life. So rewinding back to the Inner Patriarch, what would it actually look like if we accepted that the reason why we see all this abuse of power outside in the world is because we are refusing to do that inner work? Remember, the people that come to me are ones that are already pretty conscious, and what I'm doing is going in and we start working with their childhood, with their past lives, with previous traumas, whether they're big T or little t traumas. We go through there, we make sure that we repair all of the ruptures, bringing in those subpersonalities, making sure that all the pieces of them are being validated, being loved, being accepted, and being honored, so that in general they can choose. Their emotions no longer control them. They are in command of the energy in motion, their emotions, and therefore they're able to focus that energy into creating their dream life. So those people, those of us who are super conscious, we don't suffer from panic attacks or anxiety or depression or any of those things, because we know that that a feeling in our body only lasts 90 seconds, that feelings are states, not traits. I am not a sad person, I am just feeling sad right now. And we're teaching those things to our children so that the next generation and the next generation and the next generation are already being raised in a super conscious capacity, which is absolutely going to change the world. So the third thing really is that you have to realize that it doesn't matter how much work you do out there if you're not willing to do the work in here. If you're not willing to look yourself in the mirror and say, I hate women. And see how that lands for you to actually say that out loud. You know, I am abusive. I am an abuser. You can take the way that I work with rectifying those subpersonalities is that I do a lot of mirror work. So I do journal it out. I do find the pieces. You know, maybe I'll put on a tape recorder, say I want to speak to my inner patriarch, and I'll shift my chair and I'll start talking. Thank you after a few minutes. It's easier to do voice dialogue with someone prompting you, but you can just stream of consciousness into any of those parts of you. You can go into any of those parts of you and say, okay, I want to talk to my cosmic pain slut. Okay, I want to talk to my this. But when it comes to this inner patriarch, it is a part that so many of us don't want to look at, to the point that women are leaving marriages, because it's mostly the women who are filing these divorces, instead of looking and seeing what part of them inside is being reflected through this marriage that's happening. Because, so again, super consciousness is all about you being the microcosm and everything else being the macrocosm to you. So you are truly creating every aspect of your life. So there are no victims. So if you are someone who's living in an abusive relationship, there is a part of you that wants that. Another axiom of, besides there are no victims, is having is evidence of wanting. So here we are, an entire society, an entire world that has systemic abuse of power, who has systemic control of power via fear and anger. We have a huge macrocosm of abuse of entire populations, of oppression of entire populations. And the most valuable thing that we can each do that would really truly change the world is by taking each one of those things we see out there and bringing it in. I am a racist. And being able to say that and feel the feelings. Where in your body do you get resistance when you say that? Can you even say it? When you say it, does it feel true, or does it feel so foreign you want to throw up? Because there is a part of you that is a racist. Because you are a whole person. And the more you can accept that you do have the capacity to be racist and say, no, I'm not a racist. No, I don't see color. Like, I do see color, and I do see that they're being oppressed. And I know the best way for me to change is to accept and love and know that there are parts of me that are racist. But I choose to act in the world from my non-racist beliefs. If I just ignore that there are racist beliefs that run through me, then I'm going to accidentally offend people all the time. That's what white privilege really is that us trying to hide the fact that we're not racist. But we are. Everyone is. Black people are also racist. Asian people are also racist. They're not even racist. They're ethnicist. Ethnicist? I don't even know what we call it. We call it racist, but again, what did I say at the beginning? We only have one race. We have tons of ethnicities. We have tons of cultures. Right? There are people out there that literally would want to kill me if they heard me saying what I talk about. Dressing the way I dress. Speaking the way I speak. There are people on this planet right now that I know if they saw this video would send me death threats. Would not want me to continue to live. Because I'm a woman. First of all. Very first of all, because I'm a woman. Because I'm open-minded. Because I'm not talking about Christian belief systems. Not talking about God or Allah or Yahweh. Right? So I'm not any of the three major religions. I talk a lot about open, very open magic, so witch hunts sort of stuff. Again, that kind of goes into the three main religions, but there's even people out there that are like, whoa, you talk to dragons, you're a crazy person, you should be in a not a penitentiary, a psych ward. I know that there are people on this planet that want to oppress me. So I take the time to look in the mirror and accept that there are parts of me that really, really hate what I do. That I come live every week and talk to you guys. That I'm constantly giving the information that I am doing. That I am talking to dragons. That I am in politics. That I am trying to really and truly affect change out there. But the reason why I act out in the real world is because I've worked with my inner self enough to know what actions are really benefiting me and what actions are really benefiting the future. I don't just act to act, and I'm not just acting for my own benefit, but how can I integrate inside of me all aspects so that when I interact with the world, I am choosing exactly how I'm going to interact, exactly how I'm going to respond. There is no hidden part of me that is going to just lash out. So to bring this back to the abuse, you have so many men out there who don't even know that they are what is considered an abuser. Because they've been, what did I say? You could think of any sitcom. And imagine that scene of this dad coming home from work, kind of stressed, getting his gin, and then all of a sudden yelling, right? Red Foreman. That 70s show is the one that I think of the most. We all laughed our asses off because of how real that portrayal was of a blue collar, even white collar. I know that Red wasn't really, like, he was more of a blue collar family. But when you ask women who are lawyers, who are finally leaving these abusive relationships, what took you so long? Oh, I didn't realize that him only choosing when he got mad to break my stuff and he never broke his own stuff, that was abuse. I didn't realize that when we got in a fight and the next day he pretended like it didn't happen and I felt like a crazy person, that was abuse. I didn't know that when everything I did was wrong, that was abuse. Because I wasn't getting beat. Or when he did hit me, he wouldn't hit me somewhere someone noticed. It was always somewhere that was covered. See, we tend to give the abusers this benefit of the doubt that, oh, well, they just lost control. And yet they're able to think rationally enough of, I'm not going to break my shit, I'm only going to break hers. Well, I'm not going to hit her somewhere that is going to show, I'm going to make sure it's covered. So all of a sudden you realize that the rational mind was engaged. It's the exact same thing that's happening in the outer world. You have all these, you have 43 million people that are enslaved right now. Do you know that? What did I say earlier? 75 million people are connected into the superconscious web and really creating from that superconsciousness. 43 million, 25% of which are children, are in a slave trade right now. They are slave workers. Most of them sex slave workers. There are children that are born every day that are never registered, that are then put up for all sorts of things, all the way up to, I've read stories about crazy satanic ritual sacrifices. Do I believe that fully? The jury's still out on that. I do know that there is some deep, deep-rooted evil shit going on that the mainstream media broadcasts, cast a spell on us by talking about a race war that doesn't even really exist, by focusing on police brutality only and not focusing on the fact that those police officers are probably going home to women and children that they're also beating the fuck out of. Whose uncle, who's not a police officer, who's a nice lawyer, is probably doing the same shit to the aunt. That's what I mean by systemic. We ignore it within our own lives. We ignore it within ourselves. When you grab your child by the arm, instead of using your words, you're being abusive. There are so many things that we do to control power using anger and fear that we do in our own lives. If you come out with nothing else from this live stream today, please start recognizing, am I controlling power right now? Am I using a power play? Is there something going on right now where I want to be in control? And to get that control, am I using fear or anger to do so? Am I getting so mad that my kids are afraid of me and therefore I'm getting what I want? Because if that's how you act, and then you wonder why your children throw temper tantrums to get what they want, that's literally why. You throw temper tantrums as far as they're concerned. If you tell them, get your damn shoes off the floor, blah, 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 and you scare them into cleaning up, and then later on, they yell at you because they don't want to clean up, they learned that from you. Those are mirror neurons. You learned it from your parents, who learned it from their parents. What I teach is generational habit breaking. These are cycles of generational abuse that have been happening for millennia that can be rooted in all sorts of different places if you want to. It's very fascinating. I could go on a whole live stream just about talking about the curse of Eve and how much that has infiltrated us, and that belief in the patriarchy, that women are cursed because Eve ate of the apple of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil and gave it to Adam. In the Bible, it literally says that women shall be beholden unto their husbands and that they shall suffer through childbirth. So that's why people think childbirth is supposed to be painful. Why they regaled women to be alone in these huts while they went and burned all the midwives and called them witches. When people come to me and say, well, you don't know what it's like to have oppression, I remind them that I'm a woman, so I actually do. Just the fact that I am a woman means that I am treated differently. Doesn't matter that I'm a white woman who lives in a good part of town, who's always had money. I get that all of those other things affect. Women of color get treated differently than I will. Women with no money are going to get treated differently than I am. Women with a lot of money are going to get treated differently than I am. But we're all women, and we're all going to get treated differently just on that fact, and then add all the other ones. I mean, I don't know about you, but I never bring my car down to the shop because I know that the people at the shop are going to treat me like dirt, and I haven't done the research enough to know how to talk to them. Now, if I wanted to really learn about cars and I really wanted to have a conversation with them and it was something that was my passion, I know some really, really good female mechanics. In fact, if they didn't all live out of state, I would be taking my car to those mechanics and not to the guys that I don't interact with, I make my husband deal with. But again, those are stories that are just common, right? I can bring up the sitcom. I can bring up that cliche that women are going to get double charged and screwed over if they bring their car to a mechanic. we haven't ever even passed the Equal Rights Act in America. Black men had the right to vote before any woman of any color had the right to vote in America. So yes, I understand that Jim Crow laws existed and there were many, 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 many black men who never actually were able to exercise their right. I understand that. But timeline-wise, black men got that right before women did. You think about how our country was created and how we learn about women like Mrs. Adams and Mrs. Washington, who never voted, who lost children to the wars, who lost children in just coming to America, who never got that right, who never got to vote on who was going to represent them. And then you look at the people who are representing us here in America. It's mostly men, mostly white men, mostly lawyers, and mostly millionaires. How is that equal representation? It's not. It's why I love working with people like the next Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Whoever you are, I know you're out there and I know I'm working with you. I have a dream to be president of the United States of America, and I'm constantly working on that. That is an out there thing. That is absolutely an out there thing. I have to be scheduling this and planning that and figuring this out. So many things. You guys think 4 years is far away, but it's really not. But for as much work as I do out there to move forward in that dream of being president, I do double the work in here. What kind of leader am I going to be? What are the blocks in my leadership? What is stopping me from creating what is necessary for me to have the funds necessary to run? Look at how many people were running back in 2019 for the Democratic spot, and now we only have Joe Biden. I get it. Michael Bloomberg had a ton of money, and he didn't end up getting anything. But you have to have that balance, right? Pete Buttigieg dropped out because he ran out of money, even though everyone loved him. Michael Bloomberg dropped out because nobody loved him, but he had a ton of money. So where is that balance? Do we really want another white old guy as our president? I don't think so. Even Bernie Sanders. There were a lot of things about him that I can kind of get behind, but I don't believe in giving people handouts. I really don't. I believe that there is a way that we can have this stuff using capitalism. I don't think that socialism at all is the way to go. Single-payer healthcare is not a socialistic idea, but it's marketed to us that way. Mainstream media markets these things to us this way. Casting spells, broadcasting, constantly trying to get the general public to be paying attention to one thing while something else is going on. They are controlling us using fear and anger to focus our attention. 75 million people on this planet don't believe that. And it's my goal to get that number to at least 4 billion people. If we can get half of the people on this planet to understand that we are truly being manipulated, controlled, fear, scarcity, lack, all those things, then we're going to change the world. And when people say, well, I don't have enough time for that, it's because they have already prescribed to the inner patriarchal idea that time is somehow limited, that we only get 24 hours in a day, and in that time, X amount can only be done. That's not true. Time comes from you. It does. Einstein time is that relative time, how time flies when you're having fun, but then, we've all played that game where we look at the clock and we're like, okay, I'm not going to look again for another hour because I only got an hour left of work. We look at the clock, it's been like 3 minutes, right? Time is relative. Time comes from you. But we're not even taught that. We're taught lack and scarcity around time. Oh, I don't have time for that. Oh, I don't have time for that. Oh, I don't have time for that. Oh, I'll never have time for that. I'll never have time for that. That is an inner patriarchal idea that somehow, something outside of you controls how much time you have to do the things that you care about. I don't know about you, but I have busted out some things that I thought were going to take me hours, like days, in 2 hours, because I turned off all other distractions and just focused right in on it and was really feeling the groove. You know, I have friends that write their books in 30 days, and then I have other friends who have been writing a book for 10 years and nothing happens. Where are you putting your priority? Where are you putting your time? Where are you focusing? When you focus your energy somewhere, that's what it goes to, and it's because you're rewiring neurons in your brain to actually strengthen that part of you that is helping you create it. So if you start believing fully and completely that, yes, I have the capacity to be as evil of a dictator as I can imagine, but I also have the capacity to be as loving and accepting as a leader as possible, then you get to choose. So if we go through again the 4 steps, and they're not even steps, they're just 4 things that you really need to be looking at and paying attention to when you are, really rectifying this idea inside of you that you have this internal patriarch. You have this part of you, this subpersonality inside of us. Men have it, women have it, that are the epitome of the man that we're all trying to get out from underneath, right? The first thing truly is just accepting that there is a part of you, a subpersonality part of you that believes that way. That you get to choose whether or not you're going to act from that. And that there are no victims, so when you're choosing, it's because you have a lesson to learn. That the more inner work that you do, the more external effect you have. That what you have right now is evidence of you wanting it somewhere inside of you. So if you want something different, then you want to have something different, then you need to want something different on the inside. And that means going back to the first thing, which is accepting that there's part of you that you haven't accepted yet. And the final thing is really understanding, truly, truly understanding that this is all a part of changing the world. That the more that you can really see and recognize and call out the places where power is being abused, and call out those people in your life that are being abusive, and give them resources. Hey, here's this book I read. Hey, here's this podcast I listened. Hey, here's this 45-minute long video on YouTube that I think would really change your fucking life if you watched it. Those are the ways that we really change the world. That is how we will really dismantle the inner patriarchy, which will then dismantle the external patriarchy. When we have a critical mass of people on this planet who have integrated, loved, and accepted all aspects of themselves as whole and complete humans, then we are going to change the world, because society will become whole and complete without all the judgment, without all the shame, without all the guilt, without all the anger, without all the control. We will each have our own power. We will each have our own true sovereignty. We will each be interacting with each other from full clarity. All resources online. Full understanding, knowing, trusting that we are all here creating a beautiful masterpiece here on Gaia. So thank you so much for being here today. Remember to like and share. I will down in the description are resources for you if you want to learn more about anyone that I was talking about today. If you are interested, I am hosting a free Naked Mirror Mantra class to talk all about the mirror work that I was referring to. I will leave that link in the description below as well. It's on June 24th, 2020. It's completely free. It'll be 1 hour long on Zoom. It's going to be a lot of fun, so make sure you're registered for that. And I will see you all next week. I love you.